Good morning, everyone. I trust all is well. It's a very chilly, cold morning here in Cape Town. Thank you for making time to attend this morning's session. I also would like to thank Angelique for setting up the sessions and ensuring everything runs smoothly in the background. Thank you, Angelique. Then ASDSA have been nominated to serve on the National Apprenticeship Artisan Development Advisory Body hosted by DHET during May. We will send you information afterwards. There's 4 meetings in a year, and most of the time it's to do that. Well, the new name is called NADAP. It's a statutory advisory forum between government, organized business, and organized labor that deliberates on national apprenticeship and artisan development legislation, policy, advocacy, programs, curricula, research, knowledge management, amongst other matters, in order to advise the Minister on suitable solutions for the apprenticeship and artisan development. You know that we are supposed to produce 30,000 apprenticeships by end 2030. So we do have a seat as ASDSA on there, and we are very pleased to be on there. So yes, then we want to welcome Thandi Mabena as the chairperson of ASDSA. Sharon has taken the role as the CEO. Thandi is an innovative business human capital strategist who works, coaches, leaders, teams, entrepreneurs, and individuals to empower them to achieve their goals. Then welcome, Thandi. Then the next one, update, NQF level 7, QCTO. Remember, there was a 2-day workshop through Africa Competency Development. The dates have been set. For face-to-face is 19-20 July. The online will be 25th and 26th July. So if you haven't sent your forms through to ACD, please do so. You can copy me in so I can just let them know there is a few of the ASDSA members that is available that will be attending. I think the price ranges from 3 to 4.5, depend on what you attend, online or face-to-face. There is an application form, and I can post that again. And those are only for OEDTP practitioners that completed the NQF level already, or the learnership already. So it's a 2-day update, QCTO. You will be RPL'd and you will get your certificate afterwards. Then there was a confusion on the last enrollment date for unit standards and apprenticeship-based, let's call it trades modules. Some of the CETAs post notes and sent out letters to say by the 30th of June 2024 would be the last enrollment date. I just want to make you aware that some of the TVET colleges mentioned that they're not going to enroll learnerships as, let's say, for example, NQF level 2 by the 1st of July this year. They're only going occupational qualification route. So if you do enroll, just make sure that you ask them what route they are following. Then, just to mention again, the link of the recording will take a few days. There's some editing to do, then it will be placed in the WhatsApp group. You will receive 1 CPD point. We will put that at the end of the link, at the end of the presentation. Then I also want to mention, remember last year we had 2 sessions by Leonie that talked about the QCTO qualifications that went through the curriculum documents. Now, potential dates have been set. We will also place that in the WhatsApp group. On the 14th of July, the first session will take place, the implementation of QCTO qualifications and the curriculum documents. The second session will take place on the 28th of July, QCTO external assessment specification document. And the third session will be on the 11th of August, realignment of learning material, including assessment. So that would be, take the verification process through the MOU in the workplaces, learner enrollment training processes. So she will go through the curriculum documents with you. It will be an 1.5-hour sessions, and we will let you know the times. It will be a paid session, just be aware of that, as there is a lot of work that goes into that. Then, today's session is all about disability employment equity. Rustim Ariefdien is one of our members and specializes in everything about differently able. I would please like members to put any questions in the chat box while Rustim presents so he can answer afterwards. Thank you, Rustim, for making yourself available and share your expertise with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Marina, and thank you once again for the ASDSA to allow me to present. It's very important that as the sector of disability, we are able to demonstrate that we can be of value to business, and in that way we are able to advance our employment, our economic empowerment opportunities, and all of that. So before I start the presentation, I just want to allude you to a particular happening that has taken place. And that is that the Disability Employment Equity Guidelines indicated that the disability percentage should be 7.5%. That has been a major change that has taken place. It is now going to be 2% based on the employment equity amendments and targets that has been released of late. So I'm just going to highlight that very much through my presentation. So, you know, you can update your strategies with yourselves and your clients. Okay, so let me start my presentation. Right, so essentially, the premise that I'm going to start my conversation on today is demonstrating to you what are the assets that disability yields to benefit business in South Africa. There are definite examples or advantages of dealing with disability assets. And I'm going to start that off first by looking at certain pieces of legislation that, that mentions all of this. The first is the Employment Equity Act, which I'll come back to now. Then the Skills Development Act, and also the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. So the reason why I'm speaking to all these three is because all of them pertains to employment some way or other, and I'll highlight it as we go through that. So in the Employment Equity Act, we've of course got the Employment Equity Amendment Act. And just a point about that from a disability perspective is that we have in there just a how can I say, a reinforcement of what was understood to be in place already, and that is that there would be guidelines in terms of how employment equity needed to be implemented. And I think what's happening now with the targets or quotas, whichever language you want to use, it now has those guidelines. And one of those guidelines are that I'll keep on highlighting through this conversation is that 2%. Then I'm going to just talk about reasonable accommodation a little lower down as well, but going through a bit of the definition. I'm going to look at the technical assistance guide, which sets out the practical guidance to employers. In fact, I'm not really going to spend time on this because I more want to focus on the impact of employment equity rather than the specifics. And then what's also attached to the Employment Equity Act is the Code of Good Practice on Disability. And this is the code, is a guide for employers and employees on key aspects of promoting equal opportunities and fair treatment for people with disabilities. So those are the three legislative pieces that affects the disability employment equity. So what is the state of disability at this point in time? The World Health Organization indicates that there's NLO, they're very similar in their estimates, but it's about 15% of the world population is disabled. According to the census 2011, it's about 7.5% are disabled. Just a point that census 2021 is going to come out soon, and we expect that the disability percentage is going to be around about 12%. And then the latest Commission of Employment Equity report is 1% of the workforce is disabled. Now, this is very interesting because consistently through the years when it was generally accepted that the target should be according to the demographics of the country, and that demographics is standing at 7.5%, the Commission on Employment Equity report was constantly indicating that we're falling way short. This, of course, is changing now because 1.2% of 7.5% is a much smaller overall part of the pie than 2% or 1% as a percentage of 2%. So this is definitely something that is going to have an impact. So let me just mention one of the impacts that we have now. As a person with a disability and an advocate of disability in the workplace, this is very disappointing for us because it means that disability is not taken seriously. However, from a business perspective, it makes things easier, and I think this is the rationale as to why that percentage was put in place. Because if a company was not able to demonstrate in their employment equity plan, which of course is going to start afresh as of this year, if you couldn't achieve that disability target of 7.5% or whatever it would be, then it means you're not compliant. And I think that was one of the major reasons why the 2% came in. And you'll notice how this also links in very clearly with broad-based Black economic empowerment. So employment equity, just in terms of certain key characteristics that I just want to highlight in terms of the Employment Equity Act and its various technical assistance guide, as well as the Code of Good Practice. The disability definition has been changed ever so slightly, and it's been changed in terms of being aligned to international norms. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You can definitely read up on it in terms of articles that has come out. Or when you look at the disability definition in the Employment Equity Act, you can still get to understand many of the terms. It's just that certain things has been nuanced and slightly changed. And then what is reasonable accommodation? It's the adjustments made by employers to ensure that employees with disabilities are able to perform their jobs on an equal basis with others. Now, this is the reasonable accommodation is not just for disabilities. It goes beyond disabilities. But you are guided by the technical assistance guide as well as the Code of Good Practice as how you can navigate through this particular process. But besides the fact that you've got to put reasonable accommodation in place, generally it's not a very onerous task. Let me give you an example of myself. I'm in a wheelchair, so do you have a ramp into your building? Do you have lifts in your building? Generally, that's not a huge challenge, but if it is a challenge, then of course there is another aspect of the Employment Equity Act that comes into play, and that is unjustifiable hardship. So that's an extreme situation where I think I in a wheelchair will not be able to get into a building, and therefore reasonable accommodation would not be able to be met. But generally, it's not a problem. And also, a lot of the reasonable accommodations required does not always require money. Sometimes it just means moving off furniture, placing people closer to bathrooms or disability toilets, and it's that type of thing. Or maybe lunchtime, there's somebody that can assist somebody to reach the microwave in the canteen, that type of situation. So that's what the reasonable accommodation is about. When it comes to the employee of persons with disabilities, you get the conditional job offer. This only applies when you are wanting to employ or appoint a person with disability. And the reason why that's there is in order for a business or a company to have the opportunity to confirm what the reasonable accommodation of the person is going to be, specifically if it's got financial aspects. So let me give you an example of financial aspects. Let's say you find a competent computer analyst that you'd like to employ, and the person has got a visual impairment or could be totally blind. In a case like that, you need to be able to verify the disability and also make sure that the implementation of the reasonable accommodations is you are able to do. For example, you may have to install special software on the computer that can cost a bit of money. So you need to be absolutely sure what that is all about. Then another aspect that comes out in employment equity is disability disclosure. So this is a big irony. If the World Health Organization indicates that 15% of the population, the world population, are persons with disabilities, would South Africa be different? I would actually argue, yes, we are different, and we're different in the sense that we are still a third world country, still very much in a developmental stage. And two causes of disability is violence. That's a cause, and in South Africa, our violent statistics is not good. That's the first side, and then the second side is snake bites, specifically in KZN. KZN has one of the highest populations of disability in the country. So I would argue that the disability percentage in the country is much higher than 15%. I would also argue that we probably represent a substantial portion of that disabilities percentage in companies already. Now this means that if you take a typical company, in all probability, they meet the disability percentage target, specifically now that it's 2%. And I would always advise companies to go on a disability disclosure. Let me give you a couple of examples that I've come across. I did a presentation to an online retail company a few years ago. This is at least about 15 years ago, when disability employment equity was relatively new. So we had the directors there. And I noticed that one of the directors was chose his seat very, very carefully, and that he also had his head in a certain way. He wasn't looking at me straight. And then he actually disclosed in that meeting that he has got less than 50% hearing within his one of his ears. And that was actually a disclosure that had taken place. And that particular company had one more person with a disability to count. People are still concerned, employees, they still concerned about disability being a stigma. How you overcome that's very important as a business, to not let people feel that they're going to carry that stigma or that label. And when it comes to the other aspects that I'm going to unpack now, skills development and broad-based Black economic empowerment, there are definite advantages to try and overcome the disability disclosure side. As mentioned earlier, the employment equity process is now going to be the renewal of the 5-year plan, which I think everybody's preparing for as of September, October this year. And then, of course, the employment equity reports that wouldn't, whatever the percentage is that you are going to be speaking about, that's something that of course will have to be taken into account in terms of the way you report on employment equity going further. Okay, so let me move on to skills development. Skills development is my favorite because I think there's a lot of levers within skills development that can play a substantial role in achieving certain objectives and in terms of the financial benefits. So in terms of skills development, there's a huge skills and education gap of disabled. The reason for this is that besides the potential intellectual challenges that persons with disability has had to get to the schooling system, or the very nature of the disability in terms of the intellectual disabilities that they may not have been able to cope. This has created an educational gap. And then trying to assimilate those persons into the world of work, that has also resulted in a skills gap. But let me tell you some of the opportunities that we have created within this arena. And that is, we have been able to take learners with severe intellectual disabilities. That means that they can't read and write. And we've been able to graduate them or certificate them on NQF1 qualifications. The way that we've been able to achieve that is by looking at the methods of assessment. So instead of persons sitting down and writing, completing the assessment in the written format, we utilize alternative methods, either through a scribe, or they will do the assessments through observation, or they'll do the assessments through oral means. And in that way, we've been able to bridge this particular divide. However, there is a huge gap, and persons with disabilities are definitely disadvantaged from that perspective. So as I said earlier, learnerships are a favorite of mine. And how do you structure a learnership strategy? Now, a learnership strategy, I believe, is a good way of having a recruitment tool. But let me just take it out of the realm of skills development. It is a good way of being able to get employment equity up in terms of learnerships, because what a learnership is, it's a 12-month intervention. Can I maybe say in inverted commas, it's try before you can buy. You can basically, and this goes for anybody, not just for a person with disability, but you can place a person on a learnership and see whether they're a good fit before basically employing them. So it gives you kind of a 12-month probation period, if I can put it that way, instead of a 3-month probation period. So learnerships as a recruitment tool is definitely good. Then, of course, in learnerships itself, you'd want to employ learners and host them internally, but in some instances, the benefits of learnerships is so great, but you do not have the capacity to be able to host learners internally, then external hosting, of course, is possible. And then something that in certain quarters is frowned upon, and that is doing multiple learnerships with disabled. In fact, this scenario becomes even worse in that some people, not just the disabled, have found ways to be able to be on multiple learnerships even at the same time. Now, that's definitely not advocated, but learnerships can be utilized in terms of building a progressive platform for potential employees into the business. So you can bring them in on an NQF1 level, and they can process as an 18.2 learner through multiple learnerships so that they can get the necessary type of background. And you essentially, from a practical point of view, in my opinion, you're then able to maybe give somebody an opportunity to get used to your company over a 2-year, 3-year period before permanent employment. Then the financial considerations, there's the SETA discretionary grant funding. The SETAs generally have additional funding available depending on your sector and your SETA. Maybe I can do a shout out here for Food Bev SETA. They have of the best discretionary grant funding. Let me give it to you as an example. So the learners will receive a 4,000 Rand stipend per month instead of 3,000 Rand, and the employer will receive an additional 12,000 Rand as a grant. So definitely, you know, both sectors have this type of funding to a lesser extent, but it is there. Then the other financial consideration is the SARS tax benefits. In the SARS tax benefits, if you are dealing with learnerships, there are certain things that applies to everybody. The employee tax incentives, that's a very good benefit. It's up to 18,000 Rand for the duration of the learnership that you can get as an employee tax incentive that is cash back on your NP 201. And then you've got every single expense that you have within your learnership is tax deductible, Section 11A of the Tax Act. And then you've also got your Section 12H, known as a tax allowance. Some people like to call it a tax rebate, but essentially for a person with a disability, you can claim up to 120,000 Rand for a person with disability, compared to about 80,000 Rand if the person is non-disabled. And I just want to highlight this language, because this language comes out in the Employment Equity Act. And that is that I am disabled. I'm a wheelchair user. I've got cerebral palsy. And those of you in the audience that don't have a disability, you actually classified as not disabled or non-disabled, which is quite interesting. You know, in the good old days, you used to say, okay, I'm a person, I'm disabled. You are basically able-bodied. You know, it's one of the words that we use. So it's very interesting that the whole idea of me being disabled, the word dis, you know, you get a double negative in that you non-disabled. Very interesting. Okay, and it's going to be interesting how people get used to that type of vocabulary and language. Right. So just a final comment. I know I'm kind of harping on this, but definitely the financial considerations is very important as it pertains to skills development. But another scenario that you also need to take into account, if you are doing a learnership and you are doing the learnership for future employment, if you're going to receive in all these benefits, you actually, and let me just talk about the benefits again. It's a discretionary grant that you get from a CETA. It's all the tax benefits. You're actually going to be cash positive on this intervention. Now, let me change the language and say it's not an intervention. You're going to be cash positive on this recruitment intervention. So you're literally going to be paid money in order to employ somebody. So that's why learnerships is very, very good. And also I will highlight, when I speak about broad-based Black economic empowerment, I will highlight how you can use learnerships and the employment of persons with disabilities for employment equity in BBBEE as well. So let me move on to the BBBEE itself. Okay, so Black disability employment equity, this falls under the element of management. The percentage there is if you employ 2% of your workforce who are persons with disabilities, you're able to get 2 points. Now, this percentage of 2% is what correlates with the Employment Equity Act now, that you need to have 2% of your workforce needs to be persons with disabilities, but in the BBBEE Act, it specifically talks about 2% Black disability employment. Now, this is going to cause huge practice, I think, in the disability world, and that is that this now means that you will not want to employ white disabled people. Okay, now I know that's not the intention of the legislation, but unfortunately, I think it's definitely going to marginalize an already marginalized group in terms of white disabled employment. So that's something that I just want to highlight there. And then, of course, on the skills development side is there are benefits in placing persons into learnerships. Now, just something that I just want to highlight, which I'm sure everybody here knows, is that when you place a person with a disability into a learnership, they are an employee. Okay, so even if they're on a learnership, they do need to be counted in terms of employment equity, in terms of the way that you report on it. So that's why I'm highlighting it here. So the benefits, of course, of this disability employment through learnerships, maybe an 18.2 learnership, which is an unemployed learner, is that you are able to get your points there as well. So there are 4 points available in terms of skills development. And then socioeconomic development, why would that play a role in terms of disability employment equity? And this is the way that you can do it. There are various non-profit organizations or disabled people's organizations that specializes in recruitment. So you could approach them and say to them, look, we would like to provide you with our socioeconomic development spend. You're spending 1% of net profit after tax in order for you to get your 5 points. And you basically say to the organization that, we want to build your recruitment process because we'd like to recruit from you in future. So that's another way how you can impact disability in that particular manner. Then on the disability recruitment side, I basically like to look at disability recruitment in the following way: prepare to employ, and then support in employment. So prepare to employ, important to look at disability sensitization and awareness. It's important to look at the human resources in the organization, the current people that are there, to look at sensitizing them. Now this sensitization takes place in 3 levels from my perspective. It happens at a senior management level, which is at a more strategic level. So how does disability employment impact the business in terms of ticking all the boxes from a legislative point of view, in particular financial point of view is another area, specifically from a strategy point of view. Then you go to your middle management. Those are the line managers mainly, and it's important for them to understand how they've got to deal with disability in the workplace, an overall view of the types of disabilities that you have, and what are the types of accommodations that needs to be in place. And then of course it's the people on the ground, where they're going to be interacting potentially with persons with disabilities and how best to interact with them. Like in a wheelchair, when you meet me, please don't push me. Okay, you can actually hurt me if you push me in my wheelchair because my hands is on my wheels. And if I don't know that someone's going to just push me, my own fingers can get into the spokes of the wheels and you can hurt me quite a bit. So, these are all things that you got to just be aware of from a disability sensitization point of view. So you will have maybe an hour's worth of strategic type of awareness or sensitization to management, but then you'll maybe have a 2-hour session for your line managers and maybe longer sessions in terms of the people on the ground. So that is just getting you ready to prepare from a disability sensitization and awareness perspective. Universal design refers to preparing yourself from your physical environment. So this is where people will look at the ramps. Do you have a few stairs in front of your building? Is it easy to overcome by building a ramp? If you're going to be engaging with persons with epilepsy, how does your building have fluorescent lights that maybe needs to be changed? So that's a physical change that you need to your building. An extreme change would be that you on the 3rd floor of a 3-story building, which does not really need to have a lift according to the building regulations, but you want to install a lift because you want to be able to make the building universal. But it doesn't just refer to those type of aspects. It could even be your IT side, right? That you want to make your IT systems more accessible. So the enablement of large fonts on your computers, and believe me, this is not just for the disabled. Sometimes large fonts is just a good thing to be able to have, or alternatively, you want to use a certain type of headset, right? That is more conducive. At the moment, you can see me, I've got a wireless headset, right? And there are certain advantages of a wired headset over a wired non-white, etc. So that's the physical the physical environment compared to your human resource environment. And then finally, policies and procedures. You need to make sure that your recruitment policies are aligned. For example, on the recruitment policy, it's important for you to not be regarded as discriminatory. So when you put an ad out, you need to make sure that it is in formats that can be accessed by all people. Now, in the good old days, I don't think a lot of people do this anymore, but you place an ad in a newspaper, right? If you only place the ad in a newspaper, then you're cutting out a lot of people to be able to access it. If you put it out online, then generally speaking, people will be able to access it with their own type of accommodation. An ad, something that's online, can be read to them. They can hear it if they're visually impaired, or they can see the ad if they are maybe hearing impaired. They can basically see the ad online. So it caters for everybody. But it's not just recruitment policies. It could have to do with many other policies within your company that you need to maybe revise so that your policies are not regarded as discriminatory. Take breaks as an example, 15-minute tea break. The rules in call centers, as an example, is that if a call center operator wants to take a break, they want to go to the bathroom and they want to check their phones, right? And these call centers are massive, and maybe where their lockers are quite far away. One has got to take into account that you don't disadvantage a person that has got moving impairments, mobility impairments, to be able to do all of that and go to a toilet, and the toilet's maybe on the other floor. You know, so it's very important that even there you think about how you can build this into your policies. Then employ, finding disability. So finding disability is a needle in a haystack. And the secret as to why recruitment agencies that specializes in disability, how they source disabled, is that they have metal detectors. Because that's the one way how you find a needle in a haystack, is with a metal detector. So they essentially got the attributes of a metal detector. It's not easy for somebody that's new, and I'm talking about the human resource department, that does not understand disability very clearly as to where they need to find disability. However, access to information regarding these sources are becoming much more adept at it. So invariably, if you are outsourcing your recruitment generally, 10 to 1, your preferred supplier that is recruiting for you will be able to find persons with disabilities for you. And if they don't, then they would partner with organizations that does specialize in it. So I don't think that's going to be much of a big problem in the world today. What may be a challenge is when you start wanting to fill certain types of positions. If, for example, you're going to need an NQF 10 person with a doctorate as a nuclear physicist, I think you're going to have a problem to find anybody, let alone somebody with a disability in that regard. But if it is, maybe you've got a cleaning position within your company, that you will find much, much easier. In fact, you may not even need to use an outside company, maybe word of mouth, or just to your normal recruitment channels, you could fill a position like that. So let me tell you a little bit about the disability social grant. Now, I'm sure you know an old person that's on a social pension, right? In an old age pension. And the benefits of the old age pensioner are the same as the benefits that you get for the disability grant, because the disability grant is a social pension as well. So you get an old age social pension, you get a disability social pension. So why am I highlighting this? If you know this old person, then you will know that the benefits that the old person has, and I'm specifically talking about social pensions, government social pensions, is that you've got subsidized healthcare. Right? Everybody's got subsidized healthcare. But if you go to a government health institution, they're going to ask you, are you working? Are you not working? And if you say to them you are working, well, then you basically get charged a fee. But if you are a social pensioner or unemployed for that matter, the healthcare system will assist you. So you get health benefits. If you go to game on a Wednesday, you get a 10% discount. Or in fact, I think it could be 15%. And there are other, if you go to State Clinic or watch movies, I think they give you a 40% discount. So there are many benefits in terms of having the social grant. Now, the social grant is paid according to a financial needs assessment, which essentially means that the person gets the grant up to just about under what is regarded as your taxable salary. So let's say the taxable salary is 7,000 Rand. I'm not quite sure what it is at the moment before you pay tax. Okay, the disability grant will be measured just under that. Now, if you're employing somebody in, say, minimum wage, which is about 4,500 Rand today, they will still retain a certain part of their grant, which then means that they will also be able to still maintain these benefits that I just indicated to you now, subsidized healthcare or free healthcare, huge discounts for certain types of things. Now, if you take a person with a disability, let's say an entry-level person with a disability compared to an entry-level person who is non-disabled, you can see that the financial benefit or the value of their income or their net income is much higher than that of a non-disabled person. And this is something that, firstly, disabled people don't recognize, and I think it's something that employers don't recognize as well, because you're actually employing somebody that is financially secure. Okay, it's kind of weird. You go into a job because you want to be financially secure, but a lot of people don't realize this. Even the disabled, they feel that once they get a job, and that's why they don't go for jobs, right? Is that they're going to lose their grant. Yes, they will lose their grant, but under certain circumstances. Okay. Then, of course, you need to be able to support persons with disabilities within your environment. Very important to look at development and advancement. And this looks into what I suggested earlier about going the route of learnerships, right? You could, for example, take somebody in at an 18.2 learnership. You then say to them, look, we now want to employ you, but you want to continue the development and advancement through additional learnerships, right? And why do you want to do the learnership? In a case like this is, number one, you don't just want to get the benefits, like the tax allowances and all of that type of thing, but you also want the person to get the necessary qualifications, okay? Which then, of course, builds in your own internal policy of development and advancement of that person. And then I want to talk about medical aid. This is also an area that can actually assist in the productivity of a person with a disability. I would always recommend that if you do, when the person comes into employment and medical aid is a question either subsidized by the company or you want your employee to have the best potential medical support as possible, that they take the comprehensive packages. Let me give you a practical example what I mean by that. And I use myself as an example, but keep in mind, I'm physically disabled in a wheelchair. If I have regular physiotherapy, then that means my muscles are nicely massaged and it makes me more subtle in terms of my general movement, makes me more effective. What is actually happening is that medical aid is covering the cost of that particular intervention that makes me a better employee. So let me tell you something else about medical aid. As you know, with medical aid, you get caps, right? So you can spend so much money in a particular area. Some medical aids under the comprehensive plans will say that because of your disability, the cost of your needs is unlimited. Right. So one of the things that I used to like about medical aid when I was on it is that I could buy wheelchairs, and with Discovery Health, every 2 years, I could spend about 100,000 Rand on a wheelchair. So you can see that makes a difference. Now, let me explain to you why 100,000 Rand wheelchair makes a difference. If you take a 5,000 Rand wheelchair, you basically hear the person coming along because those wheelchairs are creaking all the way, so it's disruptive. But as my 100,000 Rand wheelchair, I will whisk past you and you wouldn't know I'm there. Okay, now I know that's a very simple way of putting it, but people are able to have the right type of assistive devices even that will make their operational lives easier, right? Or their functional lives easier. And let's just make a distinction. There's a difference between functional ability as compared to a workplace ability. Workplace ability, like for example, you need to do a special mouse for the person. The mouse must be upside down. The trackball needs to be other way around. That is not that's a reasonable accommodation, and it's not covered by medical aid, which is for functional abilities. Then another important aspect about supporting employment is transport. When you employ somebody, always ensure that you have a transport solution. So especially when you're working with mobility impairment, person is a perfect fit. We like the person. They have all the inherent requirements of the job. They're going to tick all our boxes. But there's a service called Dial a Ride that will fetch the person at home, bring them to work, no problem. Just be mindful that that's not always stable. Dial a Ride transports many people. So you're either going to have to make an accommodation to accommodate the person, or alternatively, plan the transport route for the person. You know, understand that the person is going to, your office is in Cape Town, they're going to come via taxi, they're going to go through the station deck. Is the station deck's lift working? No, they're not. Or they're going to come by bus. You know, what are the challenges from the bus depot at the Golden Acre compared to getting to where you are? One of the considerations is, are there curb cuts from their transport nodes to you if they are in a wheelchair, for example? So just be mindful. It's not your responsibility to be concerned about transport. You're basically concerned once they enter the doors of the building, but look at that. Another good method, I use this method, is to use Uber, right? Uber has got a supported service called Uber Assist. And even though it's expensive, in real terms, it may not be, because let me give you an example. I stay out in Ashland, and let's say somebody in Cape Town gives me a job. I will then say, okay, you know, I'll use the Uber Assist because we can cater for my wheelchair, but isn't there 2 or 3 other of my colleagues that stays in my area going the same way? And so we're carpooling. And I can guarantee you, if you do the calculation, it's cheaper for everybody to have a shared Uber as a carpool than all of us traveling to work on our own. Okay, so that's everything to do with disability recruitment. So how do we put it all together in terms of from a strategy point of view? So from a disability employment strategy, it's very important to determine your targets. And as I said earlier, it's 2%. The one thing about disability that doesn't affect your employment equity strategy is that 2% doesn't get broken down in the different levels of your functions in your business, right? It's an overall target. So you can, for example, focus completely on your entry-level jobs. It's maybe easier for you to fulfill that target. Why are you doing it? Because you want to be able to employ people, and you're going to recruit through learnerships in terms of finding persons with disabilities that you want to permanently employ. You want to use repeat learnerships so that you can build the skills level within the individual up the ranks. Maybe give you an example, in NQF1, you do an entry learnership like maybe business practice at the NQF1 level, then you do business administration at the NQF2 level, and you maybe end up with business admin NQF 3, which means that they're ready to go into NQF 4, which is a matric equivalent. Now, I mentioned those three things in particular because some companies have a requirement of a matric or a matric equivalent. So you can actually use learnerships to be able to build them up to that NQF 4 level, and then meet your policy where everybody needs to at least have a matric. Then you're, of course, absorbing when required. Disability, yes. If you had asked me about the YES program a few years ago, I'd say no, okay? But I think the Youth Employment Services program is an absolute good way to be able to bring any employees into an environment. So yes, for youth, it's good because you are able to improve your BBBEE level by 2 levels, right? If you buy into yes, so there definitely benefits there. But what it also does is it is a way of being able to try before you buy. So if you want to get the maximum benefit out of, yes, let me give you an example of a 50 million rand company, a 50 million rand revenue per year. So that company would need to employ, say, 6 people. I'm going to use the number 10 just to demonstrate it easier. So they would need to employ 10 people, but they need to absorb 5% of 10 people, which is half a person. And look, we can't employ half people, though you get some disabled people that are limbless, so they would constitute half a person. Please don't do that. So you can employ one person out of the 10 people in terms of employing the person in order for you to get the full benefits of yes. But what you've actually done is you've actually set up a recruitment strategy where you're allowing 10 people to filter through your organization every single year. And you maybe see that as a recruitment cost, but you're still getting the value of that YES program so that you can effectively permanently employ through that. So therefore, I would seriously look at YES specifically for disability and non-disabled, of course, but it is a good tool to use other than learnerships. And then, of course, you use the learnership financial benefits to cover costs. I'm going to mention something very controversial here. And that is that if you place somebody on YES as an example, but you then place that person onto a learnership. Now you're doing the learnership for non-BBBEE purposes. I must emphasize that because YES specifically says no learnerships. However, you are putting them on a learnership purely for the development, further development. In a case like that, the financial benefits of the learnership then further subsidizes the cost for that person. Right. And of course, if you're dealing with disability, you have so many more opportunities. And then ultimately, this employment strategy that you're putting into place allows you to earn BBBEE points. Okay, so there's a lovely term in Afrikaans, which I like to state, and that is plate, my story is 8. Okay, and back over to you, Marina.
Thank you very, very much, Rustim. You know that I can just tell the members that I think it was during May, I visited a school with Rustim here in Kuils River. I was absolutely blown away of what the school, the educators, the sponsors, you know, even the level of support these learners received. It was an absolutely eye-opener, you know, to see what they do, how they do it, how they actually teach these learners. Rustim, I don't know if you want to quickly talk about the band and how they, just to give maybe just, well, not an example, but just tell them how these learners learned how to actually read the notes, because this was an absolutely eye-opener for me to see what these learners, how they do it, you know, the time they spend on these things, and they're actually a very good band, and they're very well deserved here in Cape Town.
Yeah, so, yeah. You know, as they say, I'm going to answer the question by staying in Athlone. I'm first going to go to Simonstown, then Hout Bay, and then we can come back to Cape Town, but I know if you don't mind. Okay, so let me just contextualize it. So we're busy with this program through the Department of Education with what they call the Learners with Special Education Needs. So one of the problems that a lot of you would have if you are dealing with disabilities, where do you find the disabled? And there are not a lot of disabled people out there. It's not easy to find them, and you very often stuck with fake disabilities. Right? So you recruit somebody and they give you everything, proof of disability, everything. And these things are so authentic that you employ them and find out later that they don't have disabilities. And then, of course, you can lose a lot of money because of your tax allowances and your BBBEE verification. So we've developed this relationship with these Alton schools, and we have actually tested that we can take even severely intellectually disabled learners that can't read and write, and we can put them on these programs. So there are many things that they do at the schools. One of them is commercial cleaning. Schools needs cleaning. Okay, so that's a natural type of scenario to put them in. But we also put them into food gardens because, as you know, growing vegetables is important. It goes to the food feeding schemes, it goes to the school hostels, the surpluses get sold to the communities. So we use these assets, being the schools, to be able to place learners into these schools. Now I'm saying learners on learnerships as opposed to learners that is part of the schooling system. However, the connection is that as learners that's part of the schooling system graduates, they are able to go onto a learnership that puts them onto the NQF1 framework. If you are severely intellectually disabled, if you leave school, you basically don't have any type of educational certification. But now we can take that person, put them on the learnership, and then they are certified. So one of the areas that we have is a marimba band. And essentially they are musicians, right? And as you know, musician is a job. So we recruit these learners and we place them into this particular job. So they train on a daily basis. They come 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and they come and they hone their skills. Then we've got a marketing company that gets them gigs. So they, amongst other places, would perform at weddings. They would, some of our corporates actually ask them to come and play and that type of thing. And if you go to the waterfront, there's always one of our bands, marimba bands at the waterfront. Okay, so you wouldn't notice it because it's not easy to pick up a severely intellectually disabled by just looking at somebody. So that's where they play. So we had a very interesting incident that happened at Artscape. Now, Artscape, the head of Artscape, her name is Marlene Leroux, and she is a person with a disability. So one of our bands had to perform with the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra. But literally the band came together an hour before the performance. And the conductor of the Philharmonic Orchestra looked at these people and said, where's the music sheets? How are they going to be able to read the music so that we can play together? And the conductor of the marimba band said, just tune your orchestra. And as the Philharmonic Orchestra conductor tuned his orchestra, the marimba band got the beat. They didn't need to read music, they got the beat. The Philharmonic Orchestra conductor was so apologetic, right? That he had labeled, these people as, I can't play with them. That once again, this orchestra was able to show that they can perform. And this is the same orchestra. A couple of these orchestras goes overseas every single year, and they go and play in Germany. They go there and they go and play to people that are in need of a stimulus, a therapeutic stimulus. This year they changed their focus because this year they performed for the Ukrainian refugees. Okay, so it's a very heartwarming story that we have been able to use marimba bands in these situations, but at the back end, what I'm explaining is how did we enable it? We enabled it because of skills development and employment. Okay, Marina, I think I've arrived back at Cape Town now. Sorry about that long explanation.
No, it was absolutely wonderful. The disabled part is very near to my heart, and I mean that I often talk about it if I speak to somebody. And yeah, we do have a responsibility, as in skills development, to look after them. They can't do it for themselves, so we are the drivers to do that. And thank you, Rustim. I see there's no questions. A lot of people just, or a lot of members just say thank you very much. Very much informative. And yeah, I think every time you, how do they say, open your mouth, then we learn something. And we can take something home from that. Yes, and we can work with it. So thank you very much. And thank you to the members. The link we will place, for the recording, we will place in the chat box, in the WhatsApp group after a few days. It still needs to be edited and the link for the actual one CPD point has been placed in the chat box. You can just go in there and do that. And yeah, Rustim, thank you very much sharing your valuable information, your expertise, experience with us. Yeah, very much appreciated. And yeah, have a lovely week further.
Marina, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think I really want to do a special shout out for everybody that's here today. There are about 30 odd of us here today. And I think it's important that disability continues to be front of mind. I am a bit of a crusader in that regard, but I'm hoping that through these presentations, and hopefully I can do many more, through these presentations, I can demonstrate clearly that disability are assets to your organizations and your businesses that can yield a return. So once again, thank you very much to the ASDSA for allowing me this opportunity to present.
I think, Rustim, just to share a note here is that I think the huge task on the skills development side from us is actually, to do the awareness, proper awareness, with management right through from line managers to the workers. That's going to take some time, because obviously it's going to be a huge task for us now with the 2%. And yeah, well, we're going to work on that, definitely. But thank you very much, everybody. Keep well and have a lovely week further.